Hi everyone, I'm Larry Todd and I'm delighted to talk to you for a few minutes about the piano trio of Clara Schumann in G minor opus 17, which is being performed by my wonderful colleagues Eva, Xiaomei, and Carrie. In her time, Clara Schumann was known as one of the great pianists of the 19th century, and she had a truly international career. She concertized throughout Europe. She went to England several times. She also went as far as Russia, and she became, at an early point in her career, the Kammer virtuosine, or the chamber music virtuoso, to the Austrian emperor. She was born in 1819, so she was 9 years younger than Robert Schumann, who would marry her in 1840, and 9 years younger than Chopin, 10 years younger than Mendelssohn. And she lived until 1896, so made it through just most of the 19th century, and by the time she died, it really was the autumnal stage of Romanticism, Modernism, and a host of other isms were beginning to alter the musical landscape of Europe. Clara was the daughter of Friedrich Wieck, who was a noted piano pedagogue who taught in Leipzig. He also maintained a piano rental business, and he wrote an important treatise on how to play the piano. He took over Clara's musical education at an early point. Her mother divorced Friedrich, and so Clara was brought up by Friedrich, and he carefully groomed her for the life of a piano prodigy and a concertizing pianist. She made her debut in Leipzig at age 9, so that would have been 1828, and after that she quickly became established as one of the truly great pianists. This was at a time when there were all sorts of virtuosos on all sorts of instruments crisscrossing Europe, trying to establish careers. We usually think of Liszt as at the forefront of this because of the way he revolutionized piano technique. We think of Chopin, but there are many, many others. And in her day, Clara Schumann was arguably celebrated just about as much as these others. She's one of the first pianists, apparently, to play from memory, so that's another interesting aspect of her performance career that it usually isn't talked that much about. She had a formidable technique, a huge repertoire, and we know that she preferred the music of Beethoven. One of her favorite pieces was the Archduke Piano Trio of Beethoven. That might have given her the idea to try her hand at her own piano trio, which happened in 1846. So by this time, she had been married to Robert for 6 years. They married in 1840. They originally established their household in Leipzig. Their residence there is now preserved as a lovely museum to both of the Schumanns. But in 1844 and 1845, they left Leipzig and took up new residence in Dresden. Robert was appointed the civic music director of Dresden, and so they set up shop there. And it was in 1846 that she composed this piano trio in G minor. Before trying the piano trio, she had mainly written piano music and also lieder, including several songs with Robert. And it's really impossible to understand her music, her career, without hearing or seeing it as being in dialogue with the career of Robert. And this holds true for both of them. That is to say that there are echoes in Robert's music of Clara's music and echoes of Clara's music in Robert's music and vice versa. There's one short example I'll just demonstrate because it's one that's not that well known, but it goes to the extent of how these musicians worked and how they composed and how they created. Many of you probably know the opening of one of Robert Schumann's most famous lieder, Im wunderschönen Monat Mai, in the lovely month of May, which is the first song of Dichterliebe, his great song cycle, Poet's Love of 1840. It begins with this piano theme. what you probably don't realize is that Robert took that theme from an earlier work of Clara Schumann, who had, then Clara Wieck, had composed a piano concerto in 1833 when she was only 14 years old. And in the slow movement of that piano concerto of Clara Wieck, we find this extraordinary passage. Similarities are so close that it cannot be coincidence. It's basically a quotation. Robert is quoting Clara's piano concerto from 1833. And there are many, many other instances of this. Now, the piano trio from 1846 is in 4 movements. My colleagues are going to perform for you the first movement. It's in G minor, and it begins with a rather serious theme. Just play a couple bars of that for you. Etc. Now, it turns out that just a year or two before writing this piano trio, Clara wrote a set of 3 preludes and fugues, and the first one is in the key of G minor, the same key. And I'll just pull it up here, which will take a second, and play a little bit of that, and I think you'll recognize the similarities between them. It was in 1845 she wrote these Preludes and Fugues. In the same year, she and Robert undertook to study counterpoint together. They spent a lot of time looking at Bach's Art of the Fugue and writing a lot of serious counterpoint. So in 1845, she wrote this prelude in G minor, and the opening theme is very similar to what she then reuses a year or so later in her piano trio. So she was thinking about it, and she's thinking about this piano trio in a kind of rather serious vein. The piano trio and the piano concerto were the 2 really large-scale works that Clara Schumann wrote. Otherwise, she tended to write virtuoso pieces for solo piano. There are a few other chamber works, some lovely romances for violin and piano that she wrote for Joseph Joachim, the great violinist who was an intimate of the Schumann circle. She intended to dedicate this piano trio to Fanny Hensel, the sister of Mendelssohn. And as it happens, Fanny Hensel was writing her own piano trio, this one in D minor, another serious key, which Fanny Hensel wrote in 1846 and 47, and then she died shortly thereafter. So Clara was never able to realize the dedication. But there are 2 women composers in the 19th century who turned to chamber music, and there were not many. We think of figures such as Louise Farenc, Amy Beach, and some others. The point is that they were trying to break into the larger forms, and Clara did that brilliantly in her piano trio. A few comments about the remainder of her career. It's a very sad story. In 1853 and 54, Robert Schumann began having serious mental difficulties, and in 1854, he tried to kill himself by leaping into the Rhine River. He was rescued by some fishermen, and he was sent to an asylum in Endenich, which is a suburb today of Bonn. Clara was not allowed to see him until it was evident that he was near death, and she arrived, saw him, and then a day or 2 later he died. During these final years of her marriage, she was receiving news bulletins about Robert's condition through Johannes Brahms, who was another intimate of the Schumann circles. Brahms would go from Dusseldorf to Endenich see Robert and go back and report to Clara. After Robert died, Clara was forced to resume her concertizing career. She was suffering from various ailments. Eventually, she would have severe hearing loss. The other thing to point out is that the Schumanns had a large family. They had 8 children. And of those 8 children, 4 died before Clara passed away in 1896. She had many, many difficulties to overcome. Johannes Brahms remained her very close friend, and he survived Clara by only a few months, passing away in 1897. It was the end of in many senses of the word, of the great age of musical romanticism, even as modernism, various types of modernism were beginning to make inroads into the cultural landscape of Europe.